We will now leave our historical survey behind and move forward to a description of what is currently agreed upon assumption on what constitutes a grammatical category. A common consensus amongst linguists today is that we need to have at least 3 guiding principles for a determination of what are the basic units of grammatical analysis. The first principle says that there can be no upper bound on what should be considered to be a grammatical category. That is a basic unit that has to be posited. 2, drawing from both the Western tradition and the Indian tradition, that morphological form, lexical meaning, and syntactic function must all be determinants of class membership and serve to distinguish between classes. 3, that classes must be uniform, identified by a number of uniform criteria, and they must contrast with each other in empirically demonstrable way. So principle A then, which is that there should be no upper bound, marks this break with the classical tradition, right? And principle B, which is that there must be lexical meaning, morphological form, and syntactic distribution must be own determinants, marks a synthesis of all those traditions. Principle C is a restriction on a post-structuralism, if you want, restriction on the excesses of the substitution method and disallows just looking only at one criterion, which is syntactic distribution as the primary determinant of this condition. Given that the notion of grammatical category has to be employed in a whole host of theoretical approaches, we would like to make a theory plural notion of grammatical category. One definition that would seem to be able to work to say that if a form is to be identified as part of a grammatical category, it must satisfy 3 conditions. 1, that it should be a meaning, it should have a meaning that belongs to the same conceptual domain of all other members of that class. It must occur also as a second criterion. It must occur in systematic and similar contrast with the other members of X to other categories, such as, let's say if a category is X, then to distinguish it from other classes such as M, N, O, P, Q, right, etc. And its morphosyntactic representation must be relatable by rule to some morphosyntactic representation of the other members of X. If we define grammatical category like this, then we need one important principle, which is invoked in the second of the 3 principles, that there should be systematic and similar contrasts, makes the notion of contrast and the principle of contrast as a very important one. So what is this principle of contrast? Contrast is more than just difference. So it would seem correct, for example, to say that woman is different from an apple, but you can't say that a woman contrasts with an apple. However, it is possible to contrast a woman with a man in terms of a feature, sex. So women differ from men because women are female and men are male. For women and apples, however, there is no salient salient feature that can be binary values of which can be employed to distinguish women from apples. Rather, you could say humans are different from apples because plus living thing and minus living thing could be a feature that you can. This notion of contrast is usually formalized in linguistics with as follows: that you need to have a particular environment. You want to say that when you invoke the principle of contrast, that a grammatical form X is in a contrastive distribution vis-a-vis the grammatical form Y if and only if X and Y have different values for a property or a set of properties. Right? In linguistics, the principle of contrastive distribution is used to distinguish, say, adjectives and verbs by the property or the feature or ability to have tense or aspect affixes. An adjective for a further property could be that it is only adjectives that can be marked or co-occur with the category intensifier very. What this notion of contrast does is also presuppose an across-the-board applicability. Implicit in a statement that nouns contrast with verbs in English. So let's say again in terms of aspectual inflections and ability to be marked by the definite article, is the assumption that this statement holds for all members of the set. So not only, a noun which can co-occur with very, or a noun that can that can bear aspectual inflection is not going to be noun. So by this logic, a word like reading in the sentence, I invited him for the reading, cannot be classed as a noun because even if it is marked by the definite article, it also has the progressive inflection in. Right? By analogous reasoning, reading cannot be classified as a verb either because it is marked by a definite article. It is for these reasons, in fact, that a separate category, gerund, is proposed as a grammatical category by grammarians of English. So let us then define contrast definitively as the following. In a particular environment, a grammatical form X is in contrastive distribution vis-a-vis a grammatical form Y if and only if all occurrences of X and Y have different values of the property of a property or a set of properties. Note that semantics can also play a deciding role when one class of forms is substituted for the other. In English, verbal past participles can occur in the same position as pure adjectives do. So you can say a hot man, you can also say a bored man. There is, however, a systematic semantic difference between the meanings that the two yield. Noun modifying adjectives are descriptive, but verbal participles indicate, as we've said before, results. So this would suggest that we need to set up two separate categories of adjectives and as participles. So participles do in fact contrast with adjectives. So we could include then in the definition of contrastive distribution this additional criteria of systematic semantic difference. For most linguists, the definition of using grammatical categories rather than parts of speech has proved to be a very powerful instrument. We have, I think we can say definitively, now abandoned all traditional and tradition-inspired presuppositions about the universal applicability of parts of speech. We can now actually ask very interesting questions. We can ask whether a language has the grammatical category noun or the grammatical category adjective as a primitive in the language. For the languages like Mundari, there is significant debate as to whether they have the grammatical category distinction between nouns and verbs. Similarly, we can ask whether a language has the grammatical category tense. Many languages have been proposed which do not. Chinese, for example, is a language which does not have the category tense. For all linguists who ask these questions, of course, there is a notion of grammatical category, which is theory plural, because from a variety of theoretical frameworks, these very questions can be asked. The difference between theories is particularly relates to where they locate their analysis of universals of human language. If the universal of human properties of human language are held to originate from the general properties of human cognition, theories can choose the lexicon as the first major site of universal expression of universal properties. Cognitivist and cognitive grammar type approaches privilege the lexicon in this discussion. Right? So, if you take a quote from Langecker, which says that a language is fully describable in terms of its semantic structures, phonological structures, and symbolic links between them, it defines those semantic structures by establishing a correspondence with word classes. So, nouns in cognitive grammar typically denote things, verbs typically highlight processes, etc. In this universalist approach, then, languages will be expected to have all the basic grammatical categories. So we do not expect much variation. Construction grammar approaches, which is also cognitive linguistics based, does not show that does not, however, presuppose that word classes are universals. What they suggest, work by as Goldberg has shown, that the grammar of the language comprises of taxonomic networks of families of constructions connected to each other by general cognitive principles such as prototypicality, extension, etc. In these kind of theories, construction includes all the units of syntax, so there is no basis, and the lexicon and the morphology and lexical semantics. For such approaches, words have no special status and they encode no universal properties. For example, in Croft's 2007 Radical Construction Grammar, words on their own have only a meaning potential, by virtue of which they may play roles in the construction at the word, phrase, or sentential level. For other approaches, such as the generative approaches, reference to classes of words is rarely, if ever, made. This is because Chomsky's principles and parameters framework, or even its earlier avatars, employ a Bloomfeldian notion of the lexicon, which is a list of, or a Paninian notion, which is a list of exceptional and idiosyncratic properties. Right? The central idea in such an approach is that the properties of individual lexical items determine the outputs of syntactic derivations. So, reference to word class rather than just word is really impossible in this approach. Right? So, as a consequence, the notion of word class has very little relevance. For theoretical approaches to natural language processing, however, word class is an essential component because that forms the basis by which larger syntactic units are called. So we cannot use the the notion of word class as synonymous to the term grammatical category. Because even as in all these approaches, there is no reference to the notion of word class. There is reference, even at the level of syntactic meaning, to be able to make reference to the notion of grammatical categories. So in order to develop a notion of grammatical category, it is essential, therefore, that we have a theory neutral, or if you want, a theory plural approach to saying whether a particular lexical items, form and function is relevant for syntactic meaning or not. So the device that we are going to try and use in this system is to, rather than make a reference to word classes as the basis of which to define grammatical categories, we are going to use features. The notion of feature, and particularly the notion of distinctive feature, arose from Trubetskoy and Jakobson's Prague school in the realm of phonology. But this is a property that has been rapidly adopted in all other domains of linguistics for three principal reasons. For one, a commitment to the device of features does not automatically entail a particular theoretical choice on how they are to be dealt with. So a feature might be just something that is realized or definitional of the item in question, but they can, as a generative syntax, be used for checking, for valuing others, etc. Two, the use of features as a device does not necessarily entail a specific location or configuration to be the domain or distribution of its expression or distribution. So a feature may equally be a property of a morpheme or of the sublexical level quite generally, or it could be the property of a word or a phrase or the construction. Thirdly, features themselves can bundle. That is, they can be part of feature geometries. That is, a set of features can be used as part of the description to regularly co-occurring subgroups. So this is going to enable us to capture the idea of feature bundles without any further commitment to how and where such bundles arise. Kenishai 2010 argues that a move to describing grammatical categories as features and use of features more generally resolves the fundamental circularity of definition that underlies definitions of word class. Kenishai's insight is that as soon as some word has a property derivative from its class membership, then the fact that that very property will automatically serve as a criterion to define the word class in question is circular. It's a chain of circularity which can only be compounded if we go to define affixes as affixes that attach to noun. Features provide a way out of circular definitions, because they involve no reference to word class as definition of the feature. In fact, he suggests that word classes can be defined as an abstraction over the set of lexical items that share the same feature. So, in other words, if we take our feature as the grammatical category to, let's say, be the category of number, that is the property of being singular or plural or dual or poker, that there is no reference here to the word class noun. And we could say number is a feature attaches to the word noun, to the word class noun. Then what are nouns? Nouns are those that bear that can co-occur with the number feature.